Welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we are going to be looking at Act 3, Scene 2 of Romeo and Juliet.
Ooh, okay.
And if you thought things were dramatic before,
Oh, yeah.
this is where it gets really intense.
Oh, my goodness.
So just to recap,
Yeah.
Romeo and Juliet have secretly gotten married.
Right.
But then Tybalt kills Mercutio,
Mercutio.
and
Gosh.
Romeo kills Tybalt,
Right.
and Romeo is banished.
Yeah, so Juliet's whole world has just imploded.
Exactly. So Shakespeare puts Juliet on this huge emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
In this scene. And so we see all these different emotions like love and grief and fury
Right, and he does it all.
in such beautiful language.
It's incredible, some of the most beautiful poetry ever written.
I know. So imagine being Juliet in this moment.
Yeah.
You're waiting all day for Romeo after your wedding night.
Right.
So excited, and then you get hit with this terrible news.
Yeah, she has no idea what's coming.
So let's take a look at how Shakespeare actually unfolds this scene.
Okay.
And it opens with Juliet waiting for Romeo, and she's totally oblivious
Right.
to everything that's happened.
Yeah.
And her monologue in the beginning is so beautiful.
It is. Yeah, it's just this outpouring of longing and anticipation for Romeo.
Yeah, but there's this kind of underlying feeling of foreboding.
Yes, exactly. Like she can sense that something is wrong.
Yeah, like when she talks about Romeo being cut out into little stairs.
Yeah. Or how the world will fall in love with night.
Right. That sounds really romantic,
But it's also foreshadowing what's to come.
totally. It's
Yeah.
like Shakespeare's dropping all these hints about the tragic ending.
Exactly.
But Juliet has no idea, and
And then the nurse enters.
yeah, and Juliet thinks she's going to be bringing news about Romeo,
Right.
but instead she brings this devastating news about Tybalt's death.
Right.
And what's so interesting here is this idea of dramatic irony.
Yeah.
So as the audience, we know that Romeo is alive.
Right.
But Juliet thinks he's the one who died.
Exactly. So that just heightens the suspense and her emotional turmoil even more.
Yes, exactly. It's like watching a car crash in slow motion.
Oh, wow.
You know what's about to happen,
Right.
but you can't stop it.
You can't do anything.
And Juliet is the one who's going through it.
Yeah.
She goes through joy and then despair and then confusion and rage.
Yeah, all within just a few lines.
It's amazing.
That's incredible how he captures that.
Yeah, like Shakespeare's giving us this window into the chaos that's happening in her mind.
Absolutely. And he does it through some incredibly powerful language.
Yeah. And one of the things that stands out to me is how she describes Romeo
Oh, yes.
with these phrases like beautiful tyrant and damned saint.
Right. Those are what we call oxymorons.
Oxymorons. I'm not sure I've heard that term before.
So oxymorons are these combinations of words
Okay.
that have opposite meanings.
Interesting.
And Shakespeare uses them to create this really dramatic effect.
Okay, I see.
So in this case, Juliet is using them to express this conflict that she's feeling.
Right. So Romeo is the man that she loves, but he also killed her cousin.
Exactly. So she's torn between her love for him and her grief over Tybalt's death.
So these oxymorons aren't just literary devices.
No, they're not just there to sound fancy.
You're giving us this insight into Juliet's heart.
Exactly. They're showing us her inner turmoil.
Yeah, and they also connect to this bigger theme
Yeah.
that runs through the whole play, which is this intertwining of love and violence.
Exactly.
So Romeo and Juliet have this passionate love,
Yes.
but it leads to all this death and destruction.
Right. It's this constant push and pull.
Yeah, and this scene really captures that duality perfectly.
Yeah.
And then to make things even more complicated,
Yes.
Juliet then turns on the nurse
Right.
for criticizing Romeo.
Yeah, she gets so defensive.
Yeah, even though she's struggling with her own feelings about what he's done.
But she loves him.
She loves him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she's fiercely loyal.
Absolutely.
And this is such a key moment for Juliet
It is.
because she's starting to assert her own judgment
Yes.
and show her loyalty, even though it goes against what everyone else is saying.
Right. It's a big step for her in taking control of her own destiny.
Yeah. And then she delivers this line that's so powerful.
Oh, yeah.
She says, Romeo is banished to speak.
Oh.
That word is father, mother, Tybalt, Romeo, Juliet, all slain, all dead.
Wow.
And that word banished
Mhm.
might seem like a simple punishment,
Right.
but for Juliet, it means so much more.
It does. It's not just about being physically separated from Verona.
Yeah, it's like she's losing everything.
It is.
Her family, her identity, her future.
Right, everything.
And to her, it's a fate worse than death.
It really is.
And that line is so powerful because it shows how much she loves Romeo.
Yes.
And what she's willing to risk to be with him.
Exactly.
And this is a major turning point in the play.
It is.
Because now Julia has to make this impossible choice.
Right.
Does she stay loyal to her family?
And accept Romeo's banishment.
Or does she defy them?
And risk everything to be with him.
So that's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
And that's where we'll pick things up in part 2 of our deep dive.
Okay, sounds good. So we were talking about Romeo's banishment and how for Juliet, it wasn't just about physical distance.
Yeah, it was way more than that.
Right. It was about the loss of everything important to her.
Like her whole world just came crashing down.
Exactly. And she's just a teenager trying to deal with all of this.
I can't even imagine.
It's really incredible how Shakespeare captures the intensity of her pain in this scene.
Oh, yeah. There's that one part where she's just overwhelmed with grief and despair.
Yeah.
She even says, "Oh, break my heart, vile earth to earth resign."
It's heartbreaking.
I know, it's so raw and honest.
Yeah, but then what's so amazing is how she shifts from that despair to this incredible strength and defiance.
Like she suddenly finds this inner strength.
Exactly. And it's actually the nurse who kind of unintentionally gives her a push.
Oh, how so?
Remember she told Juliet to forget about Romeo?
Oh, yeah, like just move on.
Yeah, but Juliet is having none of that.
Makes sense.
She's heartbroken and furious.
So what does she do?
She turns on the nurse. Yeah, she questions her loyalty and rejects her advice.
And that's a big turning point for Juliet, isn't it?
Huge.
Because she's not just blindly following what adults are telling her anymore.
Right, she's thinking for herself.
Yeah, and making her own choices.
Exactly, even if those choices are incredibly difficult.
And that realization gives her a new kind of power.
Yes.
So instead of just wallowing in her grief...
She takes action.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, she sends the nurse to find Romeo.
Okay.
And give him a ring as a symbol of their love.
Wow. So even in the midst of all this chaos...
She's fighting for her love.
Yeah, it's like a little spark of hope in all this darkness.
Exactly. And, you know, I think it's interesting that you brought up those oxymorons earlier.
The contradictory phrasing.
Yeah, like beautiful tyrant and damned saint.
Right. Why do you think Shakespeare uses those so much in this scene?
Well, I think it goes back to that idea of the duality of love and violence.
Oh, yeah, we were talking about that before.
Right, and those oxymorons really embody that.
Okay.
They capture those conflicting emotions that Juliet feels towards Romeo.
Yeah, he's both the source of her greatest joy and her deepest pain.
Exactly. And I think Shakespeare is using those oxymorons to make us think about those contradictions, too.
Like he's not giving us any easy answers.
No, he's making us confront the complexity of human emotions.
Yeah, and the fact that love and hate and joy and sorrow can all exist at the same time.
Right.
I mean, we've all felt those conflicting emotions at some point in our lives.
Maybe not as intensely as Juliet.
Yeah, true, but the struggle is definitely real.
It is. So I'd love to hear from you, our listener.
Yeah, what stands out to you about Juliet's emotional journey in this scene?
What resonates with your own experiences?
It's definitely a lot to think about.
And it leads us to the next part of our discussion,
Okay.
which is what happens after Juliet sends the nurse away.
Right. What choices does she make?
Yeah, and how do those choices set the stage for the tragedy that's to come?
But before we get into that,
Yeah.
I think we should take a closer look at the nurse.
Oh, yeah. She's a fascinating character.
So we left off talking about the nurse and how she kind of flip-flops
Yeah, she really does.
when she finds out that Romeo killed Tybalt.
Yeah, it's like all of a sudden Romeo's the bad guy.
Yeah, right.
Well,
Before
like-
she was all for their relationship,
Oh, totally. She was their biggest supporter.
hoping them get married in secret.
Right, but now it's like she's forgotten all the good things she said about him.
Exactly. She's like, shame come to Romeo.
Right. There's no trust, no faith, no honesty in men.
Like, whoa, where did this come from?
I know, it's a classic example of adults letting fear and societal pressures get in the way.
Yeah, like they're not always the reliable figures that young people think they are.
Totally.
And Juliet sees right through it,
Oh, she does.
even though she's heartbroken and confused.
Just not letting the nurse get away with it.
Yeah, she calls her out on her hypocrisy.
Yeah, she asks her straight up, will you speak well of him that killed your cousin?
Ooh, that's a good one.
And then she follows it up with, shall I speak ill of him that is my husband? Wow. So powerful.
You know, right? She's basically telling the nurse that she's made her choice.
Exactly. She's standing by Romeo.
And it's such a turning point for her.
It really is.
She's asserting her own judgment and loyalty.
Even if it means going against everything the nurse and society are telling her.
Right. It's like she's saying, I'm not a child anymore. I'm a woman, and I'll make my own decisions.
Yes. I love that she's taking control of her own destiny.
Yeah, and I think that sense of rebellion really resonates with audiences.
Especially young people.
Yeah, we've all felt that struggle between what the adult world expects of us.
And what our hearts truly desire.
Exactly.
But Juliet's defiance comes at a price.
It does?
She's choosing Romeo over her family.
And those consequences are going to be huge.
Yeah. And that leads us back to that powerful speech where she says that Romeo's banishment is worse than 10,000 Tybalts dying.
Oh my gosh, yes, that speech.
It's so intense.
She uses such vivid imagery comparing banished to father, mother, Tybalt, Romeo, Juliet, all slain, all dead. It's like she's saying that Romeo is her everything.
He is. He represents love, hope, freedom, her future.
And his banishment takes all of that away from her?
Right. It leaves her feeling completely alone and lost.
So it really is a fate worse than death for her.
It is. And it sets the stage for the incredibly difficult choices she has to make in the rest of the play.
So we've seen Juliet go through this whirlwind of emotions.
Love, grief, rage, defiance.
And it all happens in the span of just one scene.
Shakespeare really packs a punch.
He does, and I think that's why this scene is so captivating.
It really gets to the heart of what it means to be human.
Yeah, to experience those intense emotions and make those tough choices.
And to fight for what you believe in, even when the odds are stacked against you.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into Act 3, Scene 2 of Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
We hope you enjoyed this exploration of love loss and the power of the human spirit.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world's greatest stories.